Hello, BookTube. It's a beautiful day today here in Boston, a beautiful blue sky day. I think there are some shoals of rain that are on the way in a couple of days and then a couple of days after that, but today was beautiful, and it was beautiful right from the beginning. A mild morning for the first time this year. And I was out very early, left the bean very early, and found myself at the Brattle Bookshop without any kind of wincing, without any kind of tucking the fingers in like this or anything like that. Wasn't cold, was perfectly comfortable. And the reason why that matters for those of you who are new to the channel is that the Brattle is a used bookstore, but they have an outdoor sale lot with thousands of books in it. And that's where I typically spend a lot of my time, which means you're open to the elements. So if it's raining, the shop won't put out the carts, so there's no reason to go if that's why you're going. If it's hot, well, you'll be experiencing it out there. If it's bitterly cold, you'll be experiencing it out there. But today, mild as dishwater. Perfect day for going and browsing at the Brattle, for the morning anyway, until I had to come back to the bean. I started missing her, and I have lots of things to do anyway, despite all the BookTube videos I'm making. Fortunately, my day is a little bit longer than a normal person's day, so I'm free to make an exorbitant number of videos today. But I found a pile of books, and I wanted to show them to you. We'll look at the mass market paperbacks first, and the first one is a mistake. It was free. In fact, all of these were free, thanks to a generous called-in store credit that one of you gave me. If you're watching, you know who you are. Thank you very, very much. It's a thing that I'm always happy to have happen when you all do it, where you just call the Brattle Bookshop in Boston and say, I'd like to give Steve some store credit. Chances are you won't even need to identify me any more than that. They'll already know what you're talking about. And thanks to that credit, these were all free. They would have been dirt cheap anyway. But the first one was a mistake anyway. I grabbed it and didn't really examine it. I knew I wanted to reread it. But format matters. Aesthetics matter. This is by Bernard Evslin, who's did a couple of books that I really like about Greek mythology, and this is one of them. It's called Gods, Demigods, and Demons, an encyclopedia of Greek mythology. Only it doesn't look like the version that I once had. It has this dumb 80s cover. And with the 80s font and whatnot. Ick. Don't want it. I don't want it in that format. I grabbed it just because this is a retelling or not a retelling. This is sort of an encyclopedia, name by name, of famous figures in Greek mythology, but not looking like this. It's not going to stick around. And then this next one, I already have. I got it because I thought immediately, since it was free, I thought immediately that maybe one of you might want it if it's up your alley, if it attends to your interests. This is a book by Frank Spearing, and it's called Prince Jack. This is the mass market paperback in which he puts forward his theory about who Jack the Ripper was. And the John Barkham reviews, I have no idea if that's still going on or what they were, but they say that this book is cogently argued and solidly documented. It is most certainly not cogently argued. There is no argument in this book. This is hysterical screed. It gets more hysterical as it goes along. It's fantastic to read, but it's divorced from reality. It's just completely unhinged. And it's not just for the theory that it puts forward. The theory that it puts forward is that Queen Victoria's grandson was Jack the Ripper. The Prince of Wales's son was Jack the Ripper. The Prince Albert Victor was notoriously stupid and inept and weak, and also physically absent from England at the time that these murders happened in 1888. So there's no scrap of this book that's true, but it's nevertheless a kind of cult classic and hysterical to read in both senses of the words. And I already have a copy of this. I got this specifically to try out the concept of waving it in front of you, a la Criminale, and seeing if you want me to send it to you, if you're in the U.S. I'm not going to spend $75 to have it go missing to you in Australia. But if you're in the U.S. and you are a Jack the Ripper fan, you might not have access to this book the way I do, right? I mean, this is like the 10th copy of this that I've seen at the Brattle Bookshop. The Brattle has a huge turnover of books, and a lot of you live in places where you have no access to anything like that. So maybe we start a tradition where I intentionally get a few doubles at the Brattle just to offer them. as giveaways, that sounds like a lot of fun to me. If you like that, if you like the idea of this and you're a Jack the Ripper fan, you don't have this book and you don't want to buy it online, I don't blame you at all if you don't want to buy it online. You don't want to risk the online charlatans and liars who will see this thing with a broken spine and pages falling out and tell you that it's just fine. At least you know what it looks like if I'm waving it in front of you. If you want me to send you this book, then let me know. So that was Prince Jack. Then we have Epic Fantasy. The whole bunch of fantasy read-alongs going on. I'm in the middle of one right now. The Belgariad Apocalypse that I'm doing with Becky from the Bookish Bryants. We're reading the Belgariad by David Eddings. One book a month until we're all done with books. But that BookTube is delightful. One of the many things that's delightful about it is that you'll often find people reading through epic fantasies. And that really intrigues me. It makes me want to have a big event where we read an epic fantasy. Pick a month where we devote it to epic fantasy. And this is the first book in an epic fantasy series. I read this when it first came out and didn't think much of it. And I've been remembering bits and pieces of it, especially the magic system, and wanting to go back to it. And to the extent that last year, I looked around for this online and it was hideously expensive for some reason. Maybe I didn't look at it right. It's by L.E. Modicit, and it's The Magic of Recluse. And I remember the thing that struck me first about this cover is that it's rainy. It's a rainy day. It's a scene on the road, and it's a rainy day. You've got mud on the road and rain falling in the picture. That intrigued me enough to want to read these, even though it's a fairly prosaic moment. There's nothing fantastic about it. And it's a magic system that's based on the concept of order and chaos, and people who have inborn abilities to manipulate either chaos magic or order magic. A few people who can do both. It's been on my mind to try and give this a second try. Unless I looked it up wrong. When I looked up this mass market, I wanted this mass market paperback. Obviously, I wanted the book that I got at the bookstore in 1991. I wanted the book that I got then. And if I might have been looking it up wrong, but when I looked up this paperback on, for instance, eBay, I started seeing outlandish prices. So when I saw it today, I grabbed it. Just the first book in the series, and this, if I remember correctly, this series bounces around in its own time stream. So this is the book after this will not necessarily be the direct sequel to this book. It could be 500 years before the events of this book. And another thing that I remember about this book is that rare for epic fantasies, it is narrated in the first person by the main character, who is nevertheless, the waifish boy who has to learn the ways of the world. Only he's really sharp-tongued. If I remember correctly, the book opens the possibility that he is narrating things in the first person, yes, but from far down the line of his life, instead of as he was an ingenue, all that sort of thing. Looking forward to reading it again. And there are many epic fantasies that we could go through. Many. I'm thinking some sort of BookTube read-along in which we read epic fantasies is probably unrealistic, but a BookTube read-along in which we read the first volume of a whole bunch of epic fantasies, that's not unrealistic, and that might be a lot of fun. And this next one is from Faden Press. It is a mass market, but it's a hardcover. And I'd never seen this edition before, so I grabbed it. This is The Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy by Jakob Burckhardt. Do we have the translator here? This was done probably 70 years ago, so it might be that no one even thought to do the translator. The translator is S.G.C. Middlemore, and this is this author's most famous book. It's had a few translations. I know that the most recent translation is much better than probably this one is, but I haven't read it. I love this little thing here. It's a little hardcover with a dust jacket. I haven't read this in forever, so I grabbed it, especially since, thanks to your generosity, I wasn't paying anything for it. Then these next two are science fiction, fantasy. This is The World of Tears by Philippe Jose Farmer. I saw these on... I didn't see these, but I saw Philip Jose Farmer came up on a couple of channels that I was watching just recently Problem is, I watched so much BookTube, I might not remember what they might have been. Outlaw Bookseller, he might have mentioned them. He has a penchant for older science fiction and fantasy. I don't actually remember. It might have been Michael K. Vaughan going through one of his boxes in his attic, or well, one way or another. I found these two Tor trade paperbacks of the World of Tears books, 3 books in each volume, and I grabbed them right away. I love these. These are Boris covers. Yeah, these Boris Vallejo covers. I think they're terrific. I'm not a big fan of the World of Tears series, but it's been a long time since I read them. I couldn't help but notice, though, the writing on the back here. Let's see here. Yes, Leslie Fiedler really ought to know better. Is a really experienced reviewer. It calls Philip Jose Farmer the greatest science fiction writer ever. Absolutely absurd, just absolutely absurd. But I wanted these in these editions. You know, they don't take up as much space. The only form of World of Tears that I would want more is if a box set of the mass markets came up, so that I got all of the Boris Vallejo covers, not just these 2. That would be great. I don't know that I will ever see that. I had it once upon a time, but I don't anymore. I checked. Then we have some murder mysteries for March Mystery Madness, which is ongoing, a gigantic BookTube event that's ongoing, celebrating murder mysteries. I found a couple from authors that I've never read, that I've never heard of, and I've never read the books. The first one is Don Giovanna by Amanda Prantera. There you have, he's checking his phone while he's kissing the fair maiden. He's checking his phone, and you can date the book by what the phone looks like. And again, as is always the case with these dirt cheap romances at the Brattle, I mainly just went by the plot description. Let me give you a bit of it here. The worm is turning. Joanna Volpe knows that her handsome Italian husband is having yet another affair, but for the first time in her married life, she cannot bear to be in communication with him at all. It would have been cruelly tactless to cast her as the wronged Elvira in the local summer production of Don Giovanni, so her fellow English countryman, Lord Henry Thirsk, has asked Joanna to create his sets, albeit against his better judgment. Henry's young wife, Gaia, thinks the whole project of rounding up English, American, and Italian talent for a night of Mozart in the Umbrian hills is a bit dated and embarrassing, not to mention an excuse for her husband's not getting on with his next novel. Until she herself is cast as Elvira. Little does she realize that Henry's directorial interest in set design will soon be escalating each time he liaises with the appealing and currently footloose set designer. Now, this was buried with all the other hardcover romance or mystery novels at the Brattle. It has the same plastic dust jacket. It was obviously the same person who collected all of these and amassed a huge collection that then ended up at the Brattle. But I don't think this is a murder mystery. Unless somebody dies in the production of that Don Giovanni, I don't think it is. We'll give it a try. It's not long. It won't take any time at all to read. This next one very much is a murder mystery. I have not read any of this woman's mysteries, but I have heard about them. This is a very particular murder by S.T. Heyman, a pen name. And the reason you've got all of these molecule paths is because what we're talking about here is not particular in the sense of specific, but particular in the sense of particles, in the sense of particle physics. It is a seemingly random, if tragic, event that Professor Max Fleischner, Nobel Prize-winning particle physicist, should collapse and die, surrounded by loving family and friends, at the celebration of his life's work, of the crowning achievement of his protege. A shame, one might think, as does Inspector Ben Jernett, that is this author's main recurring character, that the brilliant and eccentric man won't be able to hear his adopted son, Dr. Tonwo Smith, read the scientific paper that would vault him into the ranks with Newton and Einstein. But it is even more of a shame and a shock that the professor turns out to have been murdered by means of a glass of poisoned orange juice, perhaps intended for Tonwo, administered by Tonwo's own hand, and that Tonwo's paper, now rumored to contain revelations about the universe more earth-shattering than anyone had guessed, has disappeared before he could present it. So this will be, is this 1990s, I want to guess? 1989. This will be 1989 exposition dumps about the current state of particle physics. with a murder mystery thrown in, which is further underscoring my understanding that murder mysteries can really happen anywhere. That if you have a bent for this sort of thing, an Uber drive will give you exactly the scenario for a new murder mystery. I think that's really a lot of fun, where the scenario comes to you, the scene, the mise en scene, and then you come up with the story and learn all about that. I think that's fascinating. Then the next one that I want to show you is a weird bit of Brattle synchronicity. I have mentioned many times that when you go to the Brattle Bookshop, especially the sale lot outside, you should not go with any preset intentions. You can do that for the shop, I guess, but the sale lot, there is no order in the sale lot except price. $1, $3, and $5. The books aren't organized in any other way. It's just a random chance that all these murder mysteries are together just because they were all boxed together because the person who collected them dispensed with them to the Brattle by their hundreds. That's the only reason. Otherwise, they would be scattered everywhere. So I don't go to the Brattle with any kind of mental shopping list. That's a bad idea. Not only will you not find what's on your list, but you won't find anything else either. But I confess I'm only subhuman, so that when I go to the Brattle, there are some things in the back of my mind that I wouldn't mind seeing. I'm definitely not putting any demands on the Brattle gods. But the other day, yesterday, I announced Horror Mayhem, a May booktube event put on by the Bookish Bryants that centers on horror. And like February Fantasy Stories and New World's November, centers on the genre through short fiction. Short novels, but really short stories. And that has a whole bunch of interesting prompts, from gothic horror to supernatural entities to cosmic horror to folklore, folktale horror. And I made my announcement video yesterday, and I'm looking forward to May. It's going to be a lot of fun. And unlike with February Fantasy Stories and New World's November, when it comes to horror fiction, I have a lot to learn, which adds to the thrill of it. I'm not a big fan of horror stuff, and I know that's partly because I don't know it well enough. So I'm going to be watching a lot of horror booktubers who are new to me and seem to have a very tight and fun community that I will be horning my way into. But in addition to that, when I was making that announcement video and when I was thinking about Horror Mayhem, I was thinking about anthologies, horror anthologies. Few themed anthologies came up, the Mammoth Book of Werewolf Stories, the Big Book of Ghost Stories, the Oxford Book of English Ghost Stories, that sort of thing. But I was also, way in the back of my mind, not putting any demands on the Brattle, but way in the back of my mind, I was thinking, wouldn't it be neat if I came across one particular anthology by one particular editor? The editor is David Hartwell, who's done some of the greatest science fiction anthologies of all time. The Ascent of Wonder, that's the science fiction century. These are books to have and to revisit over and over again. And he did a horror anthology. Now, I was not putting any demands on the Brattle, but I was thinking sometime between now and May, it'd be great if I came across that horror anthology, and I did. The Dark Descent. I came across The Dark Descent today. Look at the size of this thing. This is David Hartwell's anthology of horror, spanning the spectrum of time with all kinds of authors, well-known and not well-known. So I grabbed it. And I'm very much looking forward to it. I will reinforce the hell out of it. But, it'll be worth it, because once I've reinforced the hell out of it, it'll be totally convenient to use, right? I mean, it's barely any size at all, so it'll fit in any bag or go anywhere. I don't need to worry about that. And if I'm reading 2 stories in, right there, and I come across an author mentioning a goblin, and I suddenly think, well, I'd really like to know how many authors in this book you refer to goblins. How many even use that word? Well, I can just ask the book to tell me where those show up. Oh, wait, no, I can't. Instead, if I want to do that, I've got to go through this book page by page by page by page by page. Let's get the 1,010 pages. And I have to use a pencil and maybe mark the places with, what's David Murphy call them? Index cards? I have to do something like that. Stone knives and bearskins. Something utterly barbaric like that. A Bronze Age mechanism of noting where a word occurs in a text. I can't search for a particular word in this thing because it is a print book. But at least it's nice and convenient to read, right? Once I've reinforced it, if I want to read the penultimate story, that's not going to rip apart, is it? Ridiculous that we're still even talking about these things. But I wouldn't have found a used ebook at the Brattle, and I haven't. I admit completely, I skirted this thing. I did not pay it any of the attention that it deserves when it first came out, which is, I want to say, the early 2000s. Oh, no, 1987. Even then, I knew this was an editor to watch because he'd done a series of science fiction mass market paperbacks by then. I knew this was an editor whose insight I really liked. Even then. And I thought when this, I think I even remember that when this came out, I thought, oh, what a waste. I'll wait for the next one. Because even then, I didn't like horror fiction at all. Now, I have every reason in the world to go back to this. Fantastic to find this. Find of the day. Then we have a book I've had many, many times. I got it again because it was, well, free, for one, and also in beautiful condition. This is from the Oxford History of the American People. And this is Robert Middlecoff, The Glorious Cause. This is his book about the American Revolution. Really one of the American Revolution one-volume books to have. If you're wondering which ones to have and which ones are really worth your time, this is nice and meaty. It's not, as compulsively readable as some other volumes, like Rebels and Redcoats, for instance, or Patriots. It's not as compulsively readable as them, but it has the same magisterial tone the rest of the books in this series do. And I've had it in trade paperback. The publisher brought it out. Oxford reprinted it about 6 years ago, and I got a copy of that. I get rid of it all the time. I give it away all the time. So now I have this one. It'll go on the history shelf. And then finally, the last thing I got, another example of how I would rather read about this author than read this author. It just keeps going on. I'm going to have the biggest library about this author of anybody I know, even though I like him less than any other reader that I know. The author is Charles Dickens. And I found this today. I found a copy of Edgar Johnson's book on Charles Dickens. This is his one-volume recension of the big two-volume life of Dickens that he did that was wildly praised when it came out a long time ago. I want to say the 70s. Okay, well, no, this book came out in 1977. His two volumes came out before that. He also did a two-volume biography of Sir Walter Scott that I would love to find, absolutely love to find. I don't think he ever did a one-volume abridgment of the Scott biography, but he did this. This is a one-volume abridgment of his two-volume Dickens book. I love reading about Charles Dickens. I have a lot of books on him. I'm greatly looking forward to reading this. I'll read this week. But I'm not a big enough Dickens fan to want a two-volume biography of him. But I remember that this thing was widely called the definitive Dickens biography when it first came out. When those two volumes were coming out, people were saying, as far as a popular biography of Dickens goes, this is the best that's ever been done. The kinds of things that people ended up saying about Peter Ackroyd's book, Dickens, decades later. So it'd be really kind of curious to read the two of them, reading the one, thinking about the other. Because there's two books that in successive generations got the same kind of praise, where people said, well, it'll never be done better than this. And I don't think there's any Dickens biography on the horizon to topple Ackroyd's, which I guess toppled this. I don't know. I will read up on it. I will read into it, but I will also read this. Dickens' life, I think, is just fascinating. I love reading about it. So there you go. That was a nice, big, temperate Brattle bookshop. It was just it was so much fun to browse around the carts without thinking I was going to die. It was just so much fun. I think this mild weather is here for the duration. I think rain is coming later this week, but even then, the temperature's not going to go down. In fact, I saw one projection that said that Friday of this week, this is Tuesday, that Friday of this week it'll hit 70 in Boston, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is genuine summer. That's the beginning of summer weather in March. We shall see. It snowed in June one year, so I'm not putting away the long johns yet. But a nice, comfortable browse at the Brattle, always enjoyable. So we have Charles Dickens, his Triumph and Tragedy, The Glorious Cause by Middlecoff, a standard work on the American Revolution. We have The Dark Descent, David Hartwell's big anthology of horror short stories, perfectly poised for horror mayhem, just perfectly poised. We have A Very Particular Murder about a particle physicist who ends up dead. We have Don Giovanna, which I don't know if this is a murder mystery. I'm intrigued. That will probably be among the first things that I read. We're slowly going to block the beam here. Then we have these Tor reprint collected volumes of The World of Tears, which will do just fine for me unless I ever find that mass market box set. God only knows what people are asking for that on eBay. I don't even want to check. I have these now, and they have 2 Boris Vallejo covers anyway. Then we have The Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy by Jakob Burckhardt, book of history much like The Glorious Cause that I highly recommend. The Magic of Recluse, first volume in an epic fantasy series, but not really the first installment, since there are later volumes that take place much earlier in the history of Recluse. Then we have Prince Jack, little experiment on my part. I already have this, so I got this intentionally. It's in fine condition. I got this intentionally to mail it to one of you. So we'll see if that works. And finally this Chumbawamba version of Encyclopedia of Greek Mythology. I love Bernard Evelyn's writing. Absolutely love it. But the one of you who gets Prince Jack might get that as well. Whether you want it or not, you might get that in the mail. So there you go. A fine Brattle haul. I don't know when I'll be back to the Brattle. It'd be tempting to go back every day this week because it's not going to be painful, but I've got other stuff to do. You wouldn't know it from all the videos I've made today, but I do. So I'm going to wrap this up and get to all that other stuff, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.